All right, so now let's take a chance to talk about creating shapes. So we talked about binding data to page elements, right? And now we're going to talk about some of the basic shapes you can create with D3. So to clean this up, I'm actually going to hide the CSS here, and you can actually I should point out you can change the layout, right? So sometimes I think that the side-by-side layout works pretty well, especially if you're using just the JavaScript and the web page itself. So here we have our data element. Let's keep that around, and really that's all we're going to work with to start. So here we have our data, and just to get started, let's look at d3.shape is the package that we're going to use to create shapes. So graphical primitives for visualization, lines, areas, kind of has all the basic stuff. So here's a reference in the API of this. You can create arcs, pies, lines, areas, curves, custom curve symbols, and stacks. So there's all sorts of things that you can create. Go ahead and take a chance to flip through this on your own and see some of the stuff. There's some pretty cool stuff that you can make, custom curves, right? And you can see the symbols that are possible. These are built-in symbols for SVG. And also you can go ahead and create lines. So we're going to take an example of building a line here. So what D3 shape, the line generator, creates is a method for generating lines based on data, right? So why do we need this? Well, so D3 line is going to create, when we're talking about SVG, a path spec for a line. So what is a path spec? So if we go back to our documentation and look at the path element in SVG, this is going to give us a lot of flexibility to draw different types of things. So here's an example. We have an SVG and a path, right? So the path is specified using the coordinates, right? So start of a line, the x, y, and points in a line, and then the end of a line. So the individual specifiers in this string, it'd be a lot of work to write these by hands, of course. And this is one place where starting to use D3 is really going to go well beyond just creating these by hand in an SVG. So we're going to go ahead and use D3 line generator to generate a line based on the Anscombe's quartet data that we have loaded up. So what do we need? So to start, we need a D3 line generator. So we want D3. So we're going to create a D3.line generator. So we're going to instantiate one. So we're going to want D3.line, right? Where we can call this variable our line here. And D3.line is going to take a couple helper functions. It's going to take an x, has an x method, which is going to set how it creates the x. So here we're going to want to pass it a function. So this takes a function. And that function is going to, given the x coordinate of our data that we pass in, it's going to go ahead and set the x on the line. So here, because we don't have any scales going, right? We can just take the data element, right, and the x attribute on that data element is what we want the line to set as x, right? And we want to do the same thing for y here. So we're going to set the y to be d.y. Right, so this is our simple line generator, and if you want to go back, I always recommend going back to the spec here. Here we are setting the x, right? So we want to set the accessor, right? If, for example, if our data, so if we look at our data here, right, and we look at the first list, these were objects with the x and y attribute. If instead we'd had inside of these, instead we had a list, like something like this here was a list with, each inner one was a list that looked like this, right? Then if that was the case, then we'd want, our x to be the first element, right? And our y to be the second element of that list. So this gives us some flexibility in defining the accessor functions given how our data is structured. So let's go ahead and set that back. Oh, we got an extra list here. Okay, so what we're going to go do now is we're going to apply that line to our SVG. So we can check. I think we still have an SVG here. If I can see the HTML. right? So we still have our SVG on the page, and we're going to go ahead and grab that SVG and apply and put a line on it. So var SVG is, we're going to select the SVG element. So let's go ahead and get that to work with. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and append a line. So we'll take the SVG, right, and we'll append we're going to append a path, right? And we can go ahead and set the data on that path, but really we can use, we're only going to be setting one element. So we can take that path, we can set the datum element of it, right? So this is going to be our data of 0, right? So we're going to set that list, right? And then what we can go ahead and do is we can set the attribute of that path. We need to set the D attribute, right? So we've been using function of D to refer to data, but on a path, looking at that, right? D is that attribute which is going to set the actual shape of it. So we're going to set that D, right? And what we're going to want to set is that path spec, right? So here's where D3's line generator can help us. We're going to pass line of D, right? So going to be a lot of D's here. We're going to pass a function here, which is going to use D3's line generator to go ahead and create that path spec. So if we wanted to see what's happening here, really, we appended that first list, right? And we appended that as a single element on here. And we went ahead and passed that bound data into the line generator for this path. Right. So now we have that path drawn. Looks like you can see a little bit of it, right? And what we could have done if we wanted to make this a little bit bigger, right, is we can go ahead and expand our path a little bit. And you can see it doesn't have any styles right now, so it's pretty messy. We could go ahead and set some of those attributes that it needs using some of those styles using D3's style setter. We could also do this in CSS. Right. So here, we could give it a style. If we go back and look at the styles that I need, we could set the fill, the stroke, and the stroke width, for example. So if we set the fill here, let's fill it with orange. Right. It's not a closed shape, although that you can set that in the path. Right. And we could set the stroke and stroke width if we want. To do that with CSS, right, we need to have a way to access our path. It's the only path on the page. So this is pretty easy, right? We can just go ahead and say for any path element on this web page, right? We can set the stroke to be black, right, and stroke width to be 1. DDH 1 pix, right? So here we have for our basic path that we created, and we can do this for any type of data. So the path is a pretty flexible way. The one other thing I did want to mention, we're working with SVG. D3 shape also has some built-in hooks if you're using like a Canvas backend. So it's agnostic to the backend. So here you can see if we just call it, it's going to return the path data string. Right? But if we gave the line generator itself a context, it would draw the line onto that context. So that would work with a canvas element. So here you'll see it probably has a context accessor. So here you could set the context on that line generator. Since we didn't set that, the line generator itself returned a path data string. Right? And if we wanted to look at that, we could just go inspect that path directly, or we could log it, right? But if we go ahead and look at that path, right, we can see the path spec that D3 created for us, which is pretty cool.